Ladies and gentlemen, the stories are coming in so fast and so furious. Me, a one-man operation, barely has time to cover it all. So I'm having to do this one in a one-taker, which means you won't get my super awesome editing skills. So let's read it together. We're at the Los Angeles Times. We're talking about how Central California towns are in trouble if the Sierra snowpack melts too fast. And I'll do another video in the future showing you the temperature anomalies that will be coming up. It'll be like summer one day and then winter the next. Because the weather is freaking out. I'm guessing due to the sun. Science would say it's due to climate. At this point, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that we all need to get prepared for it. We need to get prepared for the worst case scenario. You prepare for the worst case scenario, you don't have to worry about the best case scenario because it's the best case scenario. The rain has largely stopped after one of the wettest winters in California, which they said was about 200%. But as spring temperatures begin to climb and snow in the Sierra Nevada melts, the threat of flooding has communities across Central Valley on edge. The storms that set a rainfall record in North California have left a vast layer of mountain snowpack, which now sits at almost 200% of average. 200% of average. 200% of average for the first week of May. In some areas, the snow is 80 feet deep. That is deep, man. That is deep, according to state and NASA reports. Downstream, the rapid snowmelt is keeping public agencies juggling water levels across the state's network of reservoirs. Water district managers conduct daily conference calls to coordinate how much water each expects to release in California's labyrinth of rivers, creeks, bypasses, and canals. And in a future video, I will show you the breakdown of how all the dams and levees and other little special things are connected. It's actually quite fascinating, but it kind of shows that if one domino falls, then the rest will probably encounter serious trouble as well. The coordination is crucial as the reservoir releases affect water levels far downstream days later. Also, one reservoir's release may meet with another. So managers must painstakingly chart how much water rivers and levees can support before overflowing. Those government meetings sound like a lot of fun. The concerns are magnified in some areas by subsidence, a festering problem exacerbated by 5 years of drought in the Central Valley. Though the land's gradual sinking has been documented for decades in California, studies show that in Tranquility and other Central Valley locations, the ground has begun to dip even faster in recent years. During the drought, mandates to protect fish and other wildlife in Sacramento, San Joaquin Delta limited irrigation deliveries to farmers in places like Tranquility, west of Fresno, and Corcoran to the south. Hold on, I can take a breath. Those farmers increasingly relied on groundwater pumping for their crops, which has caused the ground to sink by several feet in some areas. The subsidence has lowered levee walls in some places and created dips and canal channels that can alter the flow of water. The levees, they're just taking a beating, said David Rizzardo, water supply forecasting chief of the State Department of Water Resources. Okay, so an official is telling us the levees have been taking a beating. That's not a good sign. It's like a boxing match, and the guy just doesn't give up. And he's taking a left and a right to the face. Wait, the guy that's not giving... I'm confused. Anyway. So we got 2 above flood stage, or at the flood stage. And then we got 7 at the monitor stage. A heat wave could cause chaos. In Mendota, where the Kings and San Joaquin rivers converge and flow north to the delta, subsidence has reduced the capacity of at least one adjacent flood control channel, officials said. The question remains how the system will hold up if a scorching heat wave or a warm rain rapidly melts the snow and the reservoirs aren't ready for the surge. A while back I made a prediction about snow melt because I'm not an expert at all on that subject. I was totally wrong, and someone informed me the thing we really need to worry about is a heat wave is one thing, but if you get a warm rain, that will make the snow melt much, much faster. And it looks like space pirates have been keeping a high pressure system over California, but it looks like that pressure system might move away. So they haven't been getting any precipitation the last month or two, but that may change in the near future. We'll see how that goes. Hopefully somebody will pay the ransom. Just think of a bathtub fairly full, and now you have several bathtubs waiting to fill it and a very small drain on the other end. Remember, this is an official telling us this. Rizzardo said, "It's like a maze that you haven't figured out how you're going to get out of yet." Yeah, I would think the best way would be to get away from the dam, although I know that's a lot more problematic and a lot harder to do than it sounds. I mean, can you imagine trying to sell a house there now? A warm spell this week prompted a new set of warnings for possible flooding. Whoa. A warm spell this week prompted a new set of warnings for possible flooding. The biggest concerns were along portions of the Truckee and Merced rivers, where Yosemite National Park issued a warning to visitors that the picturesque Pohono Bridge could be flooded by Thursday, which is today. Other rivers under watch include portions of the Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers. Not very tranquil in tranquility. When the levee collapsed in 2006, Tranquility farmers were desperate to stop the torrent of water that flooded their crops. As Danny Wade tells it, irrigation officials couldn't fill the breach fast enough. So one farmer decided to plug the hole with his sister's Porsche. California, man. This was a nice looking car that just needed some repairs to get it going again, recalled Wade, the Tranquility Irrigation District's general manager. His idea was, we're going to push the car off in that hole to slow the water down. He pushed it off there, and it ended up about 300 yards in the field. It looked like a boat going across the field. Everyone still teases him to this day. Workers eventually repaired the levee with concrete, but several thousand acres of crops were destroyed. And yeah, I think we're going to see record food prices in the future. Now, more than a decade later, this Central Valley community worries there may be a repeat of the 2006 disaster. Oh no, it'll be much worse. In the run-up to the flood, the aging earthen levee system that protects towns and farms in the Sacramento and San Joaquin River basins was pounded by historic rains, weakened by saturation, and compromised by burrowing wildlife, much as it was this winter. Likewise, the Tranquility Levee failed in May 2006 when a weekend-long heat wave melted the Sierra snowpack and sent runoff surging into the valley. Squirrels and gophers are your worst enemy. No, dude, no. We have much worse enemies than that. Although, tell my enemies, I have no enemies. In places like Tranquility, a community of 1,000 residents and 10,000 acres of farmland, preparations for the snowmelt have been underway for months. On Thursday morning, in April, Wade drove his heavy-duty pickup atop the levee that blew out in 2006 and sent water from the James Bypass Canal onto fields of cotton and alfalfa seed, reaching more than a mile east. He kept his eyes peeled for holes dug by animals. Squirrels and gophers are your worst enemy, Wade said. We're at a 95% chance or better of blowing out. Okay, so he's saying you got a 95% chance or better of blowing out on this levee, and you got dams like Trinity and Shasta. They're like 95 and 94% capacity. It sounds like a lot of bad numbers to me. The animals can create complex burrows, making the levees vulnerable to erosion when they come up against swift-moving water or heavy rain. 2 months ago, Tranquility's levee patrol found a north-south section that was compromised with 7 gopher holes, Wade said. So his district quickly purchased the 500-acre field next to the levee and excavated the land to reinforce the earthen mound. The option is give up a few acres or all your onions are going to be underwater, Wade recalled telling the previous landowner. It was an easy decision for him. For weeks, a private contractor and Wade's 8-man crew spent every waking hour packing thick dark soil onto the top and backside of the levee, with only 4 or 5 hour breaks for sleep. You're not stopping that flood. No longer concerned about subsistence, Wade said the fate of Tranquility now depends on whether the federally run Pine Flat Dam reservoir that feeds the town has enough space for all that snowmelt. The reservoir can hold 1 million acre-feet of water and was about half full on May 3rd. State estimates say there's enough water in the snowpack in the mountains above, somewhere between 2.2 million and 2.5 acre-feet of water, to fill this reservoir more than twice over. Wow. Let that soak in for a minute. 2.2 million and 2.5 million acre-feet of water. If we started getting a warm rain melting in snow too fast and they dump it, that's the only way we could flood. You could build these banks from here clear to Babel, and you're not stopping that flood. If the levee in Tranquility fails, water will have to be diverted to the South Fork of the Kings River and towards Coran and its state prison 60 miles south. Subsidence has been a known issue there too, said Rizzardo, the state water supply forecasting chief. It's not like nobody wants to fix it, it's just a hard fix. It's a lot of money and a lot of resources to do it. The forecast peak is about 2 feet over. Preparing for a worst case scenario. Dustin Fuller, manager of the Cross Creek Flood Control District, can attest to that. I can tell you, farm ground will go under this year. I don't know to what extent. Fuller said, my job is to look at worst case scenario, and the worst case scenario is water encompasses this whole area. Kind of like the middle of America right now. We have flooding in 5 or 6 states. Like, what is it, the Black River is 10 feet over its record. Way over the flooded stage. Way over the flooded stage. We've got other videos on that if you have not seen. Though he's taken state lawmakers on tours and explained what subsidence is, and that new federal standards in the wake of Hurricane Katrina require wider levees, it hasn't resulted in money for levee improvements here, he said. I'm just wondering, you know, back when George W. Bush took office, our national debt was, I think, at $3 trillion. And now it's at $20 trillion. So like in those 15 years, what did we spend that $17 trillion on? I know it wasn't space exploration, because we put the space shuttle, which was really cool and badass, in the bin of history. And I know it wasn't infrastructure improvement, because all the infrastructure is old and aging. What did we spend that money on? It's almost like we built Dubai. According to federal standards, rural areas with sparse populations might not be calculated to generate sufficient economic benefit to offset the cost of levee rehabilitation. A state legislative analyst's office report in March stated, there is an estimated $2 billion worth of crops in Fresno, Tulare, and San Joaquin counties, it said. Like I said, record food prices coming your way, I imagine. Fuller said that if Coran flooded, it would cause $600 million in damage. 16 feet of snow, which is 80 inches of water, that says under the photo. Taking matters into his own hands. Many of the state's dams and weirs were at least 60 years old. And in the Central Valley, many were built more than a century ago, the report stated. It noted that flood management responsibilities in California are spread among more than 1,300 local agencies, managing an infrastructure of more than 20,000 miles of levees and channels and more than 1,500 dams and reservoirs. In February, Fuller decided he no longer could wait for the politicians. He called a local contractor who has lived in the community for decades to supply the labor, hammered out a contract in a week with the Corsicana prison to excavate one of the wheat fields and launched a $14 million effort to raise 14 miles of levee wall by 4 feet. Fuller said his agency will be able to pay off the contract by 2020. In the meantime, crews have piled on more than 700,000 cubic yards of dirt, enough to cover 120 football fields, on top of and alongside the area's levees. They are now 4 feet taller and 10 feet wide than they were before the drought, he said. We had to take the bull by the horns to get to work. I don't have time to wait for the bureaucrats to square this mess out. That's the story. God bless everyone. It's time for you to give up your political squabbling bullshit because both sides are totally corrupt, and for everybody to unite and work together. That is the only way we will get through this. Okay? God bless everyone. Stay cool.